was being pawned out. Pawns have fun. So you was hugged up with Charlemagne after you seen him send them shots to Parks and Mel.
No, I didn't see it. I didn't see that
sent
initially.
shots at Parks and Mel.
What are you sending shots at me
And then
about?
the weekend after that, y'all hugged and made content together.
Joe Budden calls out Charlemagne for manipulating his co-host. Yeah, on the last episode of the Joe Budden podcast, it was the longest discussion Joe has had about Charlemagne in quite some time. Now, for those of you who don't know, Charlemagne was at InvestFest, and guess who was there? Queen's Flip. And the two would talk to each other, with Joe Budden noting that Charlemagne played Flip like a pawn. Now, the interaction between Flip and Charlemagne definitely came off like a play within moments of Charlemagne meeting Flip. He said that Joe will suspend Flip for hanging out with Charlemagne. Now, that's a shot in a couple of different ways. It is a subtle dig at how Joe's operation runs. Everybody knows that Joe Budden is known for cast turmoil. People turning on each other, people getting flipped on, people getting cursed out, people getting kicked off shows, Rory Maul, Melissa Ford, Flip. So he knew what he was doing with that comment. But during the discussion on the pod, Mark Lamont would step in and say that people are trying to create issues between Joe and Charlemagne. People are trying to make you and Charlemagne a beef or a thing, and I hate that. Now, Mark is saying this despite hours of content over the last 10 years proving that the two men have been sneak dissing each other for years. I mean, there was the whole Spotify negotiation where Charlemagne said Joe Budden doesn't know how to do business, despite him being paid by Joe Budden to do the pull-ups and the year-end wrap-ups. And then Charlemagne tried to sabotage the everyday struggle, suggesting to academics that he should quit the show. Then, speaking of academics, there's even the dynamic that Charlemagne has with Ack, where he platformed one of his biggest haters, Big Lon, to trash him. So, is Mark Lamont pandering to his industry relationships to look out for bags down the road? Yeah, he definitely is. Then Joe alluded to interviewing someone from Charlemagne's past.
In the night in South Carolina and loan my platform to the young lady who you're attempting to settle with. I'm not necessarily above it.
I'm saying this corner.
When Charlemagne was trying to sabotage, the Spotify negotiations, this is what Joe said. And that sent Charlemagne into a tailspin so much so that he would hit Rory and Van Lean up to smooth things over. Charlemagne wouldn't even speak to me. It's fine, I get it. You have this truce with Joe, and you don't want to, make anything look weird where you guys have to go back and forth with this. But to not speak to me when you were going back and forth with Joe, you would call him on phone nonstop. I'm on the phone for 45 minutes with you. Like, I helped you in so many regards when you needed something. Months before that, you were on my line, talking my ear off about, why is Joe doing this to me? Now, this is a testament to how these two guys never got along. Yes, they might have been friends, but when people play with your money, they could be your family. They could be somebody you love. You will fall out with them because money is how you survive in the world. Now, another big piece of this is Mandy, the seven-figure potter. Now, stick with me. She has continued to shoot at Joe in ways that aren't the most lighthearted. Now, she claims to love Joe, but I think one of the reasons she shoots at Joe is to strengthen her position with Charlemagne. Charlemagne is the one giving her lifelines constantly, despite her podcast not demonstrating the best numbers. She often makes Charlemagne's Black Effect network look way bigger than the Joe Budden network, positioning it as some type of low-level operation that can't compare. Now, regardless of what you think, that is something that, as far as a comparison of the networks, that's something that is Charlemagne's doing. His lackeys, his minions ride for him. They showed that to Joe. So when Mark Lamont Hill goes on that podcast and says that people are creating beef between them, I hope he focuses and does some actual research and realizes that this is much deeper than bloggers who make content about what's actually happening. Then we have to look at the fact that Charlemagne didn't start talking about Joe until his $20 million revelation in the New York Times. I think Joe may have checkmated Charlemagne because for all those years, Joe didn't have a public win. It was all behind a paywall. It was all behind these Spotify podcast numbers. You can't see podcast numbers. So a lot of times people can say, yo, my audio's crazy. I just signed a 7-figure deal with the Black Effect. I'm killing it. You wouldn't even know, dog. But now with Joe Budden saying I make $20 million a year, he checkmated everybody because nobody else can really say that. Nobody can say that. They can, especially in the space that Charlemagne and Joe Budden operate. Charlemagne benefits a lot from having his deals be secret, though. If you look at the legacy of iHeartMedia, many people say they don't pay well. And also these other deals that he's doing with the books and all, how much do I know what that pays? Do I know that equals $20 million a year? I have no clue. But Joe putting that out there, I feel like he put the ball in Charlemagne's court, and I won't be surprised if within the next few weeks you see an article from Charlemagne or one of them publications saying Charlemagne garners this much and he makes this much, because Charlemagne's really sensitive about his legacy, and Joe's positioning in the space is a challenge to it, especially with him being the creator guy. even though I don't think that's it. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day. Also, another key point of this Charlemagne-Joe Budden war is how Joe's co-hosts are always around Charlemagne, but the inverse isn't true. You will never catch Lauren just hilarious or envious around Joe. But on Joe's podcast, you see Mark Lamont Hill saying, Charlemagne's the greatest man I ever met. He sent me flowers, like he was going crazy. And then Flip, who was supposed to be the shooter, put his gun in the holster. And he didn't even talk badly about Charlemagne. And then you got Melissa Ford. She's not going to talk bad about Charlemagne because all these people might want to do business with Charlemagne down the line. They don't want to destroy that bridge. Now, granted, Joe is not the best at taking care of people who ride for him. You know, he probably would abandon those people and be cool with Charlemagne anyway. So it's probably not wise to shoot at Charlemagne because of the way Joe operates. But I'm just saying, Joe doesn't have any shooters in his crew. And Joe probably sees how people like Mandy, Wheezy, maybe even Mouse Jones at Taxstone are shooting at him all the time. Now, I arrived to my last point where I believe Joe feels like he has turned the tables on Charlemagne by saying he is.
Anyway, I feel like he can't. See, that sounds spicy. That's not what I'm trying to say. At the root of our most recent beef, I thought that him and some of his minions were saying things that could affect my value and negotiating power.
For years, Charlemagne talked down on Joe and everyone in the space, and now Joe seems to think that he is his equal. But Charlemagne can never envision a world where the two are the same. But I do think Joe and Charlemagne are now on equal playing fields. I know a lot of you are going to say, yo, you deriding Joe, Danny. I just lean into the fact that, yo, $1 million a month on paywall is insane. That is damn near as hard as, you know, running the Breakfast Club. I know y'all are going to be crazy, going to say, Danny, how dare you say something like that? The Joe Budden podcast has been around for 10 years. It's a podcast that the industry listens to every word. The Breakfast Club isn't that anymore. And while the Breakfast Club is still dominant in its own regard, I think its biggest knock is that it was never dominant in the radio ratings. Breakfast Club is losing the Hot 97 in New York. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry. And like I said earlier, Joe has public numbers now. Charlemagne doesn't. And I don't know how much of the Breakfast Club Charlemagne owns. I doubt he owns any. He says that on the Vlad interview, that he owns the Black Effect Network. But that's a different thing. I don't know what that entails. That is not a public deal. I know a lot of people say, you're nosy, Danny. I'm not nosy. I just know one guy is making his dealings public, and the other guy is making his dealings private. And I believe it is strategically done to be able to circumvent what he's actually aware of. I'm not saying Charlemagne is broke, but I'm just saying that if you look at that $20 million a year number, not many podcasters are doing that. And I think there are so many plays that Joe can make with a pay-per-view. He could release an album on Patreon, and he could really take things to the next level. And Charlemagne doesn't really have any plays because the way he acts on air is uninteresting. And the worst he's ever been throughout his career, because he had to pivot in 2018 or whatever. But little did he know, as he was making that pivot, there would be someone else in the space that would be a counteraction to that pivot. And he would come off as interesting, while Charlemagne would come off as a shell of his former self. But let me know, what do you think of this podcast back and forth? Charlemagne did play Flip like a pawn. He knew Flip was going to come right to him. Oh God, this guy is so calculated. He was probably listening to the pod and he's like, yo, Charlemagne, yo, Flip, it's going to be big. I know Flip is going to walk up on me trying to get content, and that's where I strike. He saw the camera. He said, all right, now it's time to get my narrative off about the Hollywood Reporter article. He said,
I love each other. Then I said, how do you feel that you fluctuate on these lists? He said, I'm glad that you said that. And he started explaining that the list that they was on, it wasn't a fluctuation. It was no number.
Oh, now it's time for me to talk about the pod, even though I just shot at Flip and Melissa Ford. But they were talking about the top 44 most powerful people in podcasting. And first of all, a lot of people don't know what they're talking about because they act like it's a ranked thing. It's not a ranked thing. Like, it's not 1 through 44. But I was watching someone and they were saying that there were numbers when there weren't any. You don't even know what podcasting's about. I ain't seen it with Charlemagne. I did not see it with Charlemagne. He didn't go out of his way to see him, but I saw Flip with Charlemagne. And that's the danger sometimes of these dynamics, is that people are going to look out for the content. But like I said, give me insight in the comments. Let me know what you think. I just had a discussion with Imani on my Patreon. It's pretty good. It gives insight into content creation. Imani confronted me in my
seen this happen in a lot of instances. This internet now intersects into real life, and y'all never account for that. And that's the ignorant part as well on y'all part. It's always so easy to just say, this isn't reality, and this isn't real life, and it's just the internet. But what happens when it does become reality? Then the person who now reacts is held responsible for your ignorant ways of being with strangers.
I think it'll be an interesting discussion that you will like. Also, S is on Patreon as well, going in on Melissa Ford for the way she treated their podcast partnership.
Between us, you know, I had a feeling like it just wasn't right.
Felt funny.
It just, you can tell when somebody's being shady, I guess is an easy way to put it. But my friend involved, she talked me out, you know, she was just like, like, there's no point in stressing about it. If anything goes left, don't worry about it. And so I didn't worry about it, but I'm also not an idiot. So I trademarked it. And not to say like, oh, I think she would steal it, but it's like, you have to, how they say, cross your T's and dot your I's.
And by the way, where is Melissa Ford? Well, that's it for this video. Follow me on Instagram, TheStopTV. Follow me on Twitter, TheStopTV. This is Danny from The Stop. Peace.